Hi, my name is Niraku, and today we're talking about diversity and inclusion in relation to special needs education. The current policies for this is diversity and inclusion policy and inclusive education for students with disabilities. I'll go ahead and read them to you. Inclusive education means that all students can access and fully participate in learning alongside their similar aged peers, supported by reasonable adjustments and teaching strategies tailored to meet their individual needs. And the NSW Department of Education values the diversity of school communities. It is committed to building a more inclusive education system for students, regardless of disability, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, nationality, language, gender, sexual orientation, or faith. The reason why I've added this is because when people think about diversity and inclusion in relation to special needs, the first thing they go to is this policy. That's the first thing that pops up on the internet is diversity and inclusion policy. Other than the issue itself, I also think that the policies are also contributing to the issues. One of them being is that both the policies look exactly the same and they're not that informational. When you look at it and compare them, the only thing different with them is that one of them is longer and has the word disability in it, and the other one is short and goes straight forward. The only thing different with these is the fact that the acts are different and how you can support these students are different. And the things that says that you can support the students are quite basic and things we already know, that all students, no matter whether they have disabilities or no matter their culture or religion, they can enroll into public schools. That's the only thing different about these. Before I talk about the issue of the policies, I'm just going to talk a bit about the issue itself. One of that being is we say we're inclusive and we're diverse, but are we really inclusive and diverse when it comes to students with disabilities? You know, when you think about it, you look at a lot of the schools in NSW, we're not that inclusive. You can never see students with disabilities and students who don't have disabilities in the same environment, more specifically in a classroom environment together. So schools are promoting inclusivity, but them themselves are not that inclusive. You can't really ever properly see students interacting with students with special needs. So how are we properly promoting diversity and inclusivity if teachers themselves don't do that? I also think that the policies itself do play a big role in this, because when you look at the inclusive education for students policy, it's very short. They haven't put much effort into writing a proper policy. And they completely relied on the Disability Standard Act, which is listed below the statement. So that's the Disability Standard Act is doing all the informing, and the policy itself isn't. So how are schools, especially teachers, going to promote inclusive education for these students if the Disability Act or the inclusive education for students with disability policy really doing anything? Like, it's not even properly written out. That's the issue of this policy, and that can impact how students or even teachers interpret and teach inclusivity. When it comes to diversity and inclusion policy, there isn't much you can really do that isn't fixable. What I mean by that is that there is some issues that may arise, like racism or educators creating double standards. However, they can solve these minor things by hiring teachers that fit within the school's dynamic. Other than changing a few things or putting in more policies, there aren't any other things you can do other than encourage educators and students to be more respectful and accepting of others' values, cultures, or beliefs, even if they don't accept them. The reason why I'm going to discuss a bit about the Disability Standard of Education Act is because it comes hand in hand with the diversity policy, as it's the core of the procedure and the act they include when discussing inclusivity. This act, plays a significant role in causing some of the issues in being inclusive within schools. As said before, as it doesn't always matter what the act says, it matters how people in the education industry interpret it. As I said before, it all comes down to how schools and teachers interpret this policy and interpret the standard. If they're not interpreting, the act or the policy properly, they can cause many issues within schools, as it can lead to educators treating students with needs in significant ways that can impact their confidence through babying them and making them feel different from other students. Another thing is that educators do not consider their feelings or how they're feeling in a situation that makes students feel useless or unable to complete simple tasks. As I've mentioned before, the other issues of this policy that impacts the issue is a lack of effort put into the policy will eventually show through in practice, and the quality of education given to these students will slowly decrease, as the policy has made it clear that they are only doing the bare minimum and not trying to even provide a fulfilling education to these students. Through this, many school curriculums and policies often take a one-sided approach to children with special needs education, as what they're teaching is only benefiting one person, and that's the teacher. It's not even partially helping the child, other than teaching half or minor parts of the compulsory curriculum, that's maths, English, and art. They're not ensuring children are having a fulfilling education, as what they're trying to do with special needs education in Australia isn't very ethical, as we've seen from the policies. They're pretty much using the beneficence approach from the ethics of principle that's really benefiting one person, and that's the teacher. If it benefited the students more than the teacher, it would have been more ethical, but in this case, it's only benefiting the teacher. At the same time, they are trying to make a difference in children's lives, but they could do more where it could lean more towards the justice approach, where they ensure these children have a fulfilling education and time in school, which they get to socialize more with peers who don't have special needs and learn essential life skills from, socializing and learning how to do that.
Kindergarten is the first inclusive preschool in Singapore that takes in 30% children with added needs. We are giving the children an opportunity to play, to learn, and to grow together. My mission, to create a world inclusive society.
星期四、星期五、星期六，还有星期天。昨天。
It's all about mindset. If you're open to it and you're ready to accept it, half the battle is already won. Children, they have certain needs, yeah. They might have some social skill or language problem, but those are areas whereby you can overcome and learning can still take place if they're being accepted. And I'm very fortunate to have a team of teachers here who actually shares my vision.
I personally love this video and I encourage everyone to watch this video in your own time fully. She goes on and talks about having a natural approach that I think should be implemented in Australian schools and that I love. You know, the natural approach is being as natural as possible in class, as they don't want other children to think that a child is different. For example, like handing a worksheet out. And I also love that they have a culture of understanding where they hear less negative words and more positive words in the class, where students see whatever their peers do as an achievement. And I honestly love that. This school is all about inclusivity and understanding that everyone is different and that is okay. And I feel like we need that understanding in a lot of schools. So children have an understanding that it's okay to be different, but also lower the stigma around people taking special needs education as a joke. They also talk about mixing special needs students and non-special needs students together as will motivate and give them self-confidence. I also think that we should implement that as it will boost their confidence. As a lot of times, a lot of special needs students feel like they don't have any motivation to even do the classwork, and they lack self-confidence. And I feel like by implementing more inclusive things into schools and in classrooms, these students will feel motivated to do more and socialize. I also feel like by having these things within these schools, it would also limit the lack of diversity and inclusion within classrooms. By having this, it will expand people's knowledge on special needs education, but also expand diversity and inclusion in schools. If I were creating a policy for inclusive education for students with needs, I would ensure the policy statement makes sense to its readers, but also clearly outlining how the educational department will make learning more inclusive and fulfilling for students with needs. For example, adding these students into other classrooms with their peers who don't have needs. For example, in classes they enjoy, like whether that be art, PE, or even geography. By doing this, it will help them build their socialization skills that they need in life. In addition to this, I would create learning programs where in these programs, educators can learn about ways they can be more inclusive with an educational setting. I think one of the things that will be in the program is learning how to take the natural approach. As I mentioned in the previous slide, I really like this approach that was shown in the video. You know, as teachers try to make it as subtle as possible when handing a child's worksheet out who may have some needs. Or in general, you know, because in Australia, we kind of lack in this subtle approach when it comes to things in handing out worksheets or anything to a child who might have learning difficulties or learning needs in general. And it's very obvious to other students that that child's different, and it makes them feel more inclusive or kind of makes them feel in a way a bit self-conscious. And by taking this approach, I think that it will boost their self-confidence and make them feel like other students, also make them feel more inclusive within the classroom. I think this would be a great way to implement within the policy if I was making it. Overall, this is a big problem within the education system and the department across Australia. Even though this issue isn't talked about enough in the media, more as something people really think about until something happens, this issue needs to be given the deserved attention it needs. I also think that what Australia is doing is unfair, and they should stop taking the beneficence approach when it comes down to these students. This is only benefiting the educators, not the students themselves. A policy that doesn't care or put much effort into its statement shows that how much they really care about their students with needs. Because when you think about it, we all say Australia's a lucky country, but yet when it comes to the education for special needs students, we're not really lucky. You look at other countries, they're doing a much better thing than we are, you know? And when you think about it, what they're doing isn't ethical either and does not bring any justice to these students' education. These children deserve a fulfilling education and experience in school. What they don't deserve is teachers, schools, departments, and systems who won't put in the time and effort to ensure that these students are getting the exact same experience as students who aren't disabled. And I find that quite sad because what are we really teaching them? You know, what are we teaching students who don't have disabilities? When you think about it, in a way, we are letting down these students who have disabilities, who have either physical disabilities, mental, or even learning disabilities. We're letting them down. We're not putting much effort in. You know, a lot of Australian school teachers are not putting much effort in. We're babying them. We're not treating them like normal human beings in some way. You know, when they go to high school, the high school teachers are not treating them like adults, like the rest of the teachers are to other students. We're not giving them the exact same experience. And I think that diversity and inclusion is a massive problem within Australia because we're not doing anything. We have these policies that aren't doing anything. They're not giving justice to these students. Initially, they don't really care. And when you think about it, this policy that in some way isn't really sincere and is giving a very comedic vibe, but it's not funny. That's what the vibe it's giving. And I think that there isn't really a proper solution to this. And I think that the way we can solve this issue one day is if the education department really comes together and creates a proper solution, or even a policy, or even programs where they teach students and educators in general to create a proper, educational curriculum for these students where they teach basic life skills and essential skills that they need, like how to socialize, how to live alone, how to do things alone. These are things that they need. They also need, to be treated like actual humans, because half the time a lot of teachers and students are not treating them like everyone else. They're treating them quite different and they feel not included. And I feel like by having proper policies and having proper solutions, I feel like one day they will feel inclusive. And I think that's probably the only way that we can actually do this, is treating them like human beings, implementing new policies that work, and implementing curriculums that work. They'll make them feel inclusive. And that's probably the only way we're gonna make a more diverse and inclusive education for them, and inclusive and diverse environments where they can feel comfortable in schools. And thank you for listening to my presentation about diversity and inclusion in relation to special needs. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.